Our Mailbag Monday episode of Locked On Blue Devils has been long overdue. We've got a lot to discuss. We've got your questions that we're going to answer here today. A Mailbag Monday edition of Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with JJ Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us on Monday, December 18th, 2023, 1 week away from Christmas. Happy holidays to all of our Locked On Blue Devils listeners out there. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Be sure to watch the show daily on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, share it with your friends, as your support means so much to us. It is a Mailbag Monday episode of Locked On Blue Devils today. Jordan Mann's back once again. He's going to help answer these questions. It's been a little while since we've done one of these, and your questions can be answered if you send them to us, lockedonbluedevils@gmail.com, or go ahead and make sure you send us a DM at LO_Blue Devils on X, and we will answer all of your questions. All right, so without further ado, let's bring on our good pal Jordan Mann, who joins us each and every week. It's been a little while since we've tackled a Mailbag Monday episode together. I'm glad to kind of dive into these questions with you, Jordan. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, brother, I appreciate you having me. But I think the last time we did Mailbag, it might have been the first time I ever came on the show. It was a Mailbag for Duke football, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. You made your debut, and here we are. We don't have any games to recap from the Duke perspective over this past weekend. We've just got questions to answer for the folks out there. So let's get right to it, man. We're going to have both basketball and football questions on the docket today. You ready to roll?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. First question came in. What does Duke miss most with Tyrese Proctor out? What do you think?
For sure, if you remember the Georgia Tech game, Duke misses a true ball handler, a second ball handler with a roach. I think even if Proctor was out with an ankle injury and was able to come back the last 2 minutes of the game, I think Duke wins that game at Georgia Tech. It just showed inexperience the way Duke ended that game and how Georgia Tech basically stole a win away. And you miss that true ball handler, and with the ball handling is his playmaking ability, where his vision and his ball handling creates not only opportunities for himself, but for his teammates. Like, his vision is just top. I love watching him play with the ball in his hands. You never know where he's going to go with it. And most importantly is his defense, JJ. He is one of my favorite defensive players to watch in the country because with his long frame, how his size, he can guard a big physical guard, or he can even stay in front of a quick twitchy guard. If the twitchy guard gets by him, he has that reach to make a deflection or a block shot from behind.
I think that's absolutely what Duke's missing with Tyrese Proctor, is just his ability to contribute on both ends of the floor. I think if you look at a couple of players on Duke's roster this year and in years past, you can kind of pigeonhole them as more of an offensive guy, more of a defensive guy. But truly, I think it's kind of open-ended. It's one or it's both for Tyrese Proctor. He's able to bring it night in, night out on the offensive end of the floor and the defensive end of the floor. So to be asked, what do you miss most? Well, I think it's all of it, because there's so much that he does bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, he is an impact player and he is an impact player in general. Like, he's not an impact player offensively or defensively. He is both. And we've seen Duke's struggles come from him because of his inability to make shots, or he just had a bad offensive game, like against Arizona, for example. But the reason being is because he's so impactful. Like, Duke needs him to be good, and let alone play the game, for them to really reach that next level, which we're trying to get to right now.
All right, next question came in from Deborah, who sent us an email, lockedonbluedevils@gmail.com. Deborah asks, will Jared McCain be someone we can rely on in big games? He's been playing well as of late. I just don't know if he can bring it in the bigger ones. What do you think? Can McCain bring it?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because he needs to be ready to be that guy for Duke. And I don't mean that as the first guy or second guy. That's Filipowski, that's Jeremy Roach. That's why they're on the Duke team. But he needs to be that third option. He needs to be ready for that third option. If Proctor is just having a facilitating game, or his offense isn't there, like we just talked about, it has to be Jared McCain. And I think Shire knows that. And I think that's why you've seen the volume of his shots become more and more as the season's progressed. It's like, hey, shoot these transition threes. They're layups for you. He did that against Hofstra. He's done that against who did Duke play before Hofstra? We had 21.
Charlotte, yeah.
Yeah, we played UNC Charlotte. And he's showing more and more aggressiveness on the offensive end. So when Duke plays the real heart of the AC schedule, I know they play Georgia Tech, but when Duke really gets challenged, McCain will be ready. And I think he needs to embrace that third scoring role behind Filipowski and Roach.
I think it's fair to ask, as you said, because he's played well lately, but it hasn't been the biggest competition for Duke against, as we just mentioned, Hofstra and Charlotte. You think about the Michigan State game, for example, McCain was not a factor really in that one. Didn't do a whole lot against Arkansas. Was one of the better players out there for Duke in their loss to Arizona. But as Deborah asks, can McCain be someone that Duke can rely on? I think as we've seen over the course of the last decade of Duke basketball in this one-and-done era, not to say McCain is one of those guys, but, the high-level recruits that are getting significant playing time as freshmen, they get more comfortable as the season moves forward. And I do think McCain becomes one of those guys that steps up night in and night out.
Yeah.
He's going to have to. He's going to have to.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, he played really well in the Arizona loss, but then you flip it over, Duke beats Michigan State, and he had a zero burger. Like, he had the same amount of points as you and I had, JJ. That's what my high school coach always said to me. So that's why I have to throw that out there. But, he has to show that he is capable of scoring double digits for Duke night in and night out. And so far he has recently, 21, 13 last two games. He needs to continue to show 10 or more for Duke. And then maybe that 10 or more can be that 20 or more on a special occasion where it gives Duke a huge road win in conference play.
Let's see what happens with McCain in the games to come. Good question there again from Deborah coming in via email, lockedonbluedevils@gmail.com. A couple of more questions to answer. It's a Mailbag Monday episode of Locked On Blue Devils, and we will answer those questions after this first break here on the program today. Locked On Blue Devils is brought to you by our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and much more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusion apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We'll keep it moving forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils alongside my pal Jordan Mann. I'm JJ Jackson. We move forward with these questions. Our next mailbag question is this. Are you worried Duke's ceiling is not what we thought it was? A pretty open question here because we haven't defined necessarily what the ceiling would be. So in your opinion, what do you think?
I think we got to give Shire credit. Like, I don't think the sky is falling for Duke, and with what Duke is, and Duke has that preconceived notion of like what they should be. But you just look back to last year, JJ, how many people wrote off, especially Duke fans, wrote off Derek Lively because he could not score. And they were just like, this guy's not a five-star center. And come to find out, when the games mattered most in January, February, he hit stride to where he was the most dominant player in the country on the defense side of the ball. And it really gave Duke that extra level. So what I'm saying is, we don't know what Duke is, and we're not going to know what Duke is in the middle of December. We're going to know it when January, February. And I got to give Shire credit because when speed bumps have happened last year and this year, the guy just adjusts, like scheme-wise, rotation-wise. I know Proctor's hurt, but Jalen Blakes has played 20 minutes or more the last two games. And here's a fun fact for you, JJ. You ready? I'll give you a fun fact. You always give me fun facts. Jalen Blakes has played 3 games where he's had 20 or more minutes per game. He's shooting 91% from the floor in those 3 games combined, 10 of 11, and averaging almost 10 points per game.
Wow.
So, good glue guy.
Look at you bringing the heat, man.
And I know people be like, well, it's Hofstra and it's UNC Charlotte. I don't care. We have seen Jalen Blakes for now going into 3 years. Like, the guy, something's clicking there. It'll give Duke reliable. Like when Proctor comes back in, he'll go down to like 10 minutes maybe, but he's earned those minutes.
The other thing I always come back to, like, this is a scholarship player for Duke. There was a decision that was made to offer Jalen Blakes a scholarship to come and play basketball for the premier program in the sport. There's a reason he's there. But, man, give it to me one more time. 3 games of 20-plus minutes.
He is 10 of 11 from the field. He's shooting 91% from the field in 3 games where he's played 20 or more minutes. And that's crazy. And on the other side of that coin, with the adjustments, Ryan Young's been playing and starting most of Duke's games this year. Duke just played Hofstra. Ryan Young played 1 minute. It's technically 2 minutes, but it was 1 minute majority of the game. And that's my point. Shire doesn't care if it worked that one game and then it didn't, like at Georgia Tech where things went sour. Completely just scratched it off. We're adjusting, going back from ground zero. And it's worked the last 2 games. I know, again, inferior competition, but they've been comfortable wins for Duke where, like, Hofstra's a pretty solid CAA team. And that conference, I told you after we recorded the previous week that UNC Wilmington beat Kentucky at Kentucky. Like, and what's their best player, Tyler Thomas, is averaging 20-some points per game. Like, that's a good guard. And Duke just ran away with them in the second half because the adjustments that Shire has made in these last 2 games after lost Georgia Tech, like the ceiling is to be determined, and that's how it should be, JJ. Like, don't write off Duke and don't say that they're great. Let them just keep playing ball.
You clearly listened to last Friday's show where I got on to people for not supporting John Shire, the in-game coach, and making sure we give him his flowers. So,
I've been on Twitter way too long. So
I'm in the same spot, and I'm seeing those same tweets, and it's pretty frustrating time and time again. But to your point about Ryan Young, even when you look at this Duke team, think about the Michigan State game. In some ways, you could argue Duke doesn't win that game if Ryan Young isn't on their team, and I think that's got to be a little bit more the genius of John Shire against Hofstra. It doesn't make sense for Ryan Young to be out there on the floor, but you don't need to totally write the guy off because there could be other games this season where you're going to need him to do a little bit more for you.
Correct. Shire clearly does his rotation by matchups. What are the strengths of the matchups? It's no rhyme or reason like some people would like to say. It's like, why is Ryan Young playing these minutes when it should be going to Sean Stewart or when it should go to TJ Power? It's like, you just got to trust the matchup situation. And Shire, and that's a guy that I'm going to trust. Like, he earns that because Kay vows for him to be the head coach. And he's earned that for me as a fan because last year Duke looked dead in the water around this time last year. And then they clicked on the AC. So it's like, hey, you deserve more than a year and a half of coaching before I jump the gun if you can coach or not.
Are you saying that John Shire's spending more time at practice than we are?
I think so. I have a source there, and they can confirm that he does. He
shows up. He shows up, and he's paying attention. I love it. All right, we got sidetracked there on that mailbag question. That was great. So, are you worried Duke's ceiling is not what we thought it was? I do think this Duke team can still the championship is the goal each and every season, being a national champion. You look at the roster, I still think this Duke team can get it done.
Yeah, what happens in November or December to me is just irrelevant to basketball, to what it means in February and March. At the end of the day, when the calendar turns over, basketball season starts. I've told you that from day one, and I'm just going to tell you that now.
All right, let's move on. Next question: how important is it for Duke to get a big win against Baylor, given the ACC has had some disappointing non-conference results?
So I just said basketball doesn't mean anything until January or February, but it would be nice to see Duke beat Baylor because not only the ACC, I don't care really much about the ACC's results against non-conference as I care about Duke's. And like the Michigan State win was important at the time, but obviously they have fallen off, and that's Duke's best win. I think they're around 500. And so just from a team morale standpoint, like beating Baylor, when does Duke play Baylor, JJ?
Next Wednesday, 2 days from now. Yep.
Okay, so with that, right before Christmas, it'd be a great Christmas present for all Duke fans. But if something happens and it does not happen, I'm still not jumping ship. It would just be you lose, it's fine. Calendar's going to flip over. You win, that's something to build off of. That's just how it's a healthy way to cope with it, JJ, because I used to be the fan where it was doom or gloom. But basketball, man, it's 30 games a year. So it's just I think Duke's going to be ready, though. I think Shire he's in his bag right now with what he's doing coaching-wise.
Yeah, so Wednesday we've got Baylor in New York, and then a 10-day break taking on Queens, and then jumping into ACC play to open up the season. So again, that question was, how important is for Duke to get a big win against Baylor, given that the ACC has had some disappointing non-conference results? There have been some disappointing non-conference results for the league. Last week we saw Louisville take a loss to Arkansas State. Things aren't going well there.
I don't know what's happening there, JJ. I mean, it's a disaster. Nolan Smith's got to be the interim head coach by the new year, because there's just no way they can hold on to Kenny Payne any longer. But yeah, you're correct. And to answer the mailbag question, like, the one team that looks good in non-conference play to me from the ACC is UNC. I mean, UNC handled Tennessee at home in the ACC SEC Challenge, and it's just, they beat Arkansas, right? They beat Arkansas, who Duke lost to, and which is good.
Competitive with UConn. I mean, yeah,
I want them to be relevant. They have the 7th-year Netflix star Armando Bacot at center, and so I just like them being good, and then Duke's good because that makes the rivalry fun. So in a weird way, I pull for UNC because I want that matchup to really matter when Duke plays UNC twice a year.
You're the best. All right. One more break. We're going to transition to football. We've got a couple of more mailbag questions that we're going to tackle here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the most fun that I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. And now we can play during basketball season too. You can pick 2 or more players, more than or less than on their projected stats, and place your entry, lock it in, and then here come the winnings. It's pretty awesome. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make PrizePicks number one. PrizePicks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks offers discounts for select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. All right, you need to do this. You need to go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege, using code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, let's wrap it up here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Jordan Mann is here with me. It's the Big J and Little J show. It's Duke FB Fans on X. If you want to follow him there on social media, at Coach J Man. Promote your work. What are you up to these days, man?
Just came out with the podcast last week about the recap of Manny Diaz being the head coach at Duke. And we're going to take probably this week off and reevaluate after the Duke-Baylor game. We're going to talk about, we'll preview the bowl game. Sorry, let me take that back. We're going to preview the Duke Bowl game against Troy, and then
coming up on Friday. It's a big week.
It is a big week, baby. It feels so weird with everything that's happened this month or 3 weeks with Duke football. But yes, Duke plays in a bowl game. Talk about that, and then after the Baylor game, we're going to recap Duke the first half of the year coming into the new year. So yeah, big things coming with the Big J and Little J show.
Duke football in the Birmingham Bowl Saturday. My apologies. Days getting ahead of me here. Saturday, they'll take on Troy. Make sure you watch that game as Duke looks to finish off the season with an 8-5 record. Speaking of which, we've got some football questions to answer here in the mailbag. Final 2. Again, send your questions to us. It's a Mailbag Monday at LO_Blue Devils on X or LockedOnBlueDevils@gmail.com. Simple question, Jordan. What did you think of the Manny Diaz hire? What's it going to take to keep a successful coach here long term? Kind of a 2-parter there. What did you think of the hire? And then a greater question at large. How do we keep these guys longer at Duke?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first part of that question, I love the hire. That was, if you follow me,
you do.
Duke FB fans, that was my number one choice. It just made sense. He not only has ACC ties with NC State, he was NC State's defensive coach there for about 5 years, 2000, 2005, I'm pretty sure. And then obviously head coach in Miami, was DC in Miami before that.
Played at Florida State himself.
Yeah, was a graduate from Florida State, and he's just very familiar with the ACC and with head coaching experience. And that's something Duke's never had as a head coach candidate. And so he's coming from the number one defense in the country, and he led the number one defense in the country. So just made all the sense in the world to line up. And so I love the hire, loved it. Second question was, what does it take to retain a guy like Diaz? So Duke's done a good job. When they hired Elko, they did a good job of backing the salary pool and basically paying Elko more money than Cutcliffe made at Duke, and then paying the assistants a lot more money than the assistants under Cutcliffe to keep the retention, to keep everybody in sync. Now, in the last 2 years, NIL has really taken off. And so the Durham Devils Club is something that Duke has started, or I'm sorry, they're affiliated with Duke football.
Right.
And basically it's the NIL club for Duke football. And basically NIL money is now how you retain good players, and coaches know that. And so they want to go to a program or have a program that is committed to funding NIL money to their players, or you're going to see a Riley Leonard, an RJ Oben, Brandon Johnson, like 3 of Duke's better players this past year in the portal to leave to go to better spending programs. And it sucks as fans. Trust me, I know. But also as a former broke college student, I get capitalizing on what you're worth in that moment. So Duke's just got to do a better job. And we have. I think I saw last week there was a post that Duke's NIL, Durham Devils Club's up 30% the last month of subscribers. So the money's starting to pick up more in the NIL. And I think that's where Duke has to be the best at in retaining a coach like Manny Diaz, because if he wins 8 or 9 games first couple of years, just like Elko did, not only will he get a pay raise, that's not going to be a problem. It's going to be, what can you do for my players to keep me, giving me the chance to have a good team, a good roster with talent.
No doubt about that. I think just continuing to buy into the program itself is something that will help tremendously. I've been pleased with the media that's out there, the coverage of this program, talking about the team a little bit more. And that starts with guys like you and I, like bringing more awareness to what's going on, but also the in-house production that Duke is doing. We know how big Duke Blue Planet is with that basketball program and the eyeballs that it drops in. There was a really cool, 6-minute video that Duke football put out there, kind of recapping the first weekend. My voice was heard in it, which totally caught me off guard. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, congrats. People, listeners, you got to watch that video. I was just like, I did the Leonardo DiCaprio meme. I was sitting here. I was like, wait, I know who that is. It's JJ.
It's JJ.
Just the start of the video.
It was so cool. It literally, it's the phone call from Nina Kink as she's calling Manny Diaz to offer him the job. Like that type stuff is next level. Find a way to let people see the inner workings of your program. You start to get attached to these players. And yeah, I think that those things go a long way. And then also just, hey, find a way to win on the field. And if you can win on the field and compete, that's when coaches are going to want to stay there. That brings us to our final question here on this Mailbag Monday, which is a big one. I thought this was really fun. I had to throw it in there. Came to us via email, lockedonbluedevils@gmail.com. If conference realignment continues in a few years, which conference would Duke fit better in, the SEC, Big Ten, or Big East? This, of course, is assuming things continue to go south for the ACC. A lot could change. We've got this new deal, the media rights deal with the ACC network. But talk to me here. What are you thinking?
This is a great question because I don't know. So I'll give you an
I don't know either. Yeah.
So I would rule out the Big East because money is the key here. And so you're going to get paid the most in the SEC or Big Ten. So it's down to those two. So then, all right, let me look at the teams that are very good academically. Vanderbilt's been just the bottom of the barrel in the SEC forever, except for maybe a couple years under James Franklin. And then you look at Northwestern, who's competed for Big Ten titles, and then they were 6-6 this year, a team that Duke demolished this past season. So I would lean Big Ten because I think Duke bodes well against other Big Ten teams rather than the SEC. I think Duke's brand of football is just hit you in the mouth, like hard-nosed football, going to beat you between the trenches, whereas the SEC, like the upper echelon, as an Auburn guy, you go sideline to sideline, you're not getting around that side. Like you're not. It's going to be closing speed. So I think the Big Ten would suit Duke the best, but geographically, it's the SEC, right? Because we are in the Southeast. But for this hypothetical, I would like Duke in the Big Ten because Duke's both wells against the
But then, as we could say, clearly in the Big Ten, the geography of it all doesn't matter with USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon now in the mix. The basketball side of things, though, that's why the Big East would be fun, man, to see those conference games that Duke would have with Villanova.
That's a great point. See, I was going straight since it was football questions previously.
Well, football drives the sport. Football absolutely drives the sport and will likely drive this decision. But the basketball purists in us, if Duke had those matchups in the Big East.
I was thinking strictly with my football mind. Now, you give me basketball mind, yes. I mean, the Big East.
Let's think about this, too. If this is a conversation with Duke leaving the ACC, then a school like Syracuse is out. They are not going to the Big Ten or the SEC. I would imagine the Big East kind of makes sense for them to go back home. So that matchup is still there. Pitt can kind of be back involved in the Big East as well. St. John's, Villanova. We've had some good matchups over the years with them. Marquette involved in the Big East.
Yeah, Syracuse, like you said, there's just teams, and that would make sense.
UConn. We're forgetting UConn. We've got the most beef in the world right now with UConn.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great question because if basketball-wise, obviously Big East, football-wise, Big Ten, and maybe both is SEC because the SEC really looks good in basketball. So it's a great question.
State your case here, though, because I want this to be well known. I do not want the ACC to fall apart. I am absolutely cheering for this conference to hold strong. But some of these things are worrisome. Are you in that same boat, or are you ready to jump ship?
No, I'm not going to jump ship. I mean, ACC headquarters just relocated to Charlotte, where I stay. So I have full faith.
We're loyal through and through, man. Yeah.
Yes, and obviously they're from Greensboro, headquarters in Greensboro, now in Charlotte. So been in North Carolina my whole life, and I'll always back the ACC. And if Florida State or Clemson leaves, they're going to figure out a way to get somebody else in. And as long as they can just keep their head above water in these weird times, I think it'll all just pan out the way it should be. So
this is more of a March conversation, but your next point was going to be, I'm just used to it being March. Growing up in school, we're rolling the televisions into the classroom and watching the games, right?
Yeah, watching the ACC tournament at noon. Duke's playing Clemson, NC State's playing Georgia Tech, UNC's playing somebody else.
Not paying attention in class, watching the game.
Getting in fights with my friends that are UNC fans about Tyler Hansbrough. It's just the
glory days. Yeah, absolutely. Jordan, it is so great to see you always, man. This was a whole lot of fun. Give me one final plug for all your work.
Yeah, you can find me at Coach J Man for my basketball takes, at Duke FB Fans for my football takes, and then at Big J and Little J Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and X as well. So I appreciate you having me as always, JJ. So thank you.
And knowing you're going to clip some segment of this conversation today for folks to see on social media, which we certainly love.
Probably.
Yeah.
The 7-year Netflix story.
Good stuff. Jordan, we'll talk again soon, okay?
See you, buddy.
All right, that's Jordan Mann joining us here on today's episode of the program. Good stuff. I love a good Mailbag Monday. Thanks for those questions. Send more, please. LockedOnBlueDevils@gmail.com, and we'll be sure to answer all of those. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you, and good day.